The chapter begins with a brief story where it is said that he crossed over to another world and accidentally became the founding lord. Centaurs, goblins, and terrifying minotaurs are everywhere. A sinister nobleman hides his murderous plans from him. But don't worry, because he has the Lord's system in his hands. In the city of Salon we see a fortress with guards. Many people pass through the gate. There is even a shepherd with sheep, a chariot with a horse. One of the people, a blonde man with blue eyes, says that he is finally in Salon. Due to the fact that the original owner of this body was beaten for stealing, he immediately took another body after he passed into this world. He calmly passes by, showing the guards something like a folding mirror with a chain. He did not expect that the original owner was a native of the famous Orlando family. He defected to this place for a variety of reasons. The guard, seeing this thing, becomes confused, and he kindly not only lets him through, but also invites him inside. This will be the starting point of his new life, the system of the Almighty Lord. The guy passes on contentedly. Then we find ourselves in a room with a bright red luxurious carpet, golden chandeliers, and an armchair where a rather old man dressed in fur and gold is sitting. He holds a paper in his hands and says that his father, Calvin Orlando, died last week. This old man turns out to be the ruler of the city of Salon. Then he says, addressing the blonde, that the new successor of their family is his half-brother, the Hungarian Orlando, and he has long considered him a thorn in his side. Then he confidently looks at the blonde, waiting for a reaction. The blonde, Calvin's illegitimate son, his name is Richard Orlando, asks what he, the ruler, wants to say by this. That old man looks at him menacingly and orders him to give up the name Orlando. He then sets a condition that, if he agrees, Wenger will give him 500 gold coins to create his own territory. At this moment, another servant arrives with a compact red chest and opens it in front of Richard. He takes one coin in his hand and thinks to himself, smiling contentedly, that with this he will have something to do in his new life. The old man says it looks like they have reached an understanding. Richard thinks about everything and says, leaning back and putting his hands under the back of his head, that the name Orlando evokes thoughts of success and fame. This is the most beautiful thing that he got from his father. The old man is surprised by these words. He asks if he really refuses. Richard winks and says with a pleased face that he should give him more money. The ruler did not expect this even more. At first he doubted what he had heard. His eyes opened, his eyebrows became higher. Even his mouth opened slightly. Then, rather reluctantly, closing his eyes and raising the index finger of his hand, he says that 1,000 gold coins and interest-free loans. But at the same time Richard will have to buy in his city. Richard tosses a coin, and grabbing it back, says that he agrees to such a condition. Then he says that he has heard that there is a group of mountain barbarians in the Colosseum. The ruler immediately replies that using soldiers to create an army is not a bad idea. But is he sure that he wants to buy a group of unruly barbarians with his 1,000 coins? Then she reminds him that these barbarians are known both for their bravery and for their desire for freedom, so let them not expect obedience from them. Richard evades and says calmly that he is doing it for this very reason. Then the old man turns to the servant, argues that if 20 gold coins per person, then 50 people come out and gives the order to send him to the Colosseum. Richard rejoices at his successful first step of the plan. A servant calls him, saying that he will take him to the star-studded Colosseum. At this time, the ruler notices that Richard is an unusual boy. We hear from the chariot the words that people have been wandering around a strange world for 10 years, and sometimes they miss their former happy life. The servant asks Richard what song he is humming. He answers ambiguously that this is a simple song from his hometown. Richard wakes up among the trash, consisting of boxes and bags. There are even rats nearby. After the original owner was beaten, he took his body and got the Lord's system. He sees in front of him a diagram of a circle of blue and yellow colors, which appears in his palm. Then, day by day, he studied martial arts and honed his fighting skills. Initially, he wanted to be a knight. He is in the form of a knight and with a sword. But who would have thought that old Calvin was so crazy that he gave him the name Orlando, which causes thoughts of success and glory to him who lives on the street. Fortunately, he got permission to expand the territory, so he escaped here. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed by people from the Orlando family. He's running away from the fortress as hard as he can. The servant announces to him that they are in place. We see an empty arena with a raised material similar to a red flag. Richard says he heard they brought a group of mountain barbarians here recently. The employee, a nice woman, says that it is. She in turn asks who he is. Richard replies that Count Augustus told him to sell them to him, and will support him while he forms an army to defend his territory. The woman understood why he was here. It turns out she thought he wanted to watch the fight. Then she says, at the same time asking that then only he did not say that she did not warn him when these guys would put all the other fighters with one blow. She paid so much for their treatment. They pass into a corridor, on the sides of which are cages where different creatures are kept. One says he's interested, the other growls, the third calls him, Richard, a sissy. Another one says it belongs to him. The worker asks if he really wants to take these people with such a worthless body, because they will just smear it on the ground and run away in a few days. They can also kill crocodiles and eat their meat. Richard looks at the crocodile cage and says that's great, because they can even find food themselves. Then he adds that maybe they will be more obedient if he beats them. The woman is shocked by his words and tells him not to be stupid, because they can kill wild boars with 2 or 3 blows. They are just inhumans, and she thinks to herself that the aristocrat, that is, Richard, has gone mad. She was already close to him. He says it's his business. He thinks it's better to say that the stronger the barbarians, the more chance they have to meet his expectations. Moreover, he has a trump card in the form of this system. This window with the Lord's system appears again in his palm, where his level is 35, strength is 45, dexterity is 35, intelligence is 11, and charm is 12. In addition to all this, there are also separate icons of inventory, shop, skills, and possessions, which is not a low indicator. This is the result of 3 years of training. Today he will finally show all his skills. He goes to the elevated part of the arena. He addresses the mountaineers standing below. He shouts to them that he bought them all from Count Salon. But as he thinks, none of you will want to become a subordinate. They listen to him attentively. Unexpectedly, Richard offers to fight him, and if they win, they will get freedom. He descends to them in one leap and continues his condition, but if they lose, they will fight for him. One of the mountaineers says that they are the best in this business, in battle. The servant and the worker are shocked by such conditions. He keeps telling him not to cry when he loses. He goes out to meet him and introduces himself as Russell, a mountain barbarian, and our hero introduces himself as Richard of Pompeii. They get into a pose for battle. Meanwhile, that woman is still surprised and does not believe that this aristocrat will really fight with a barbarian. And then he says that this scoundrel named Russell is the best among the barbarians, as he has killed many people. The battle with him will be more murderous than favorable. She turns to the servant and says he needs to convince him to stop quickly. The servant replies that his only task is to carry out the Earl's orders and bring him here. He has no right to control Sir Richard's offspring. And the woman in her head says that she has worked here for most of her life to be in this position. If this aristocrat dies, then her arena will be cursed. Meanwhile, Richard is preparing for battle by pulling up his arms. The crowd of barbarians laughs at him, saying that, oh my god, this little boy really chose Russell. With very little effort, Russell will easily kill him. One turns to Russell to take it easy, because it will be problematic if this aristocrat dies. And that barbarian says he will be merciless. He attacks Richard from a running start and grabs him by the shoulders right away. He does the same. Their foreheads collide. Russell frees his hand, takes him by the collar, lifts him up and throws him into the ground with a bang. Richard's fall makes the ground crack under his foot. Russell walks away and says that he expected at least some fun from him, but he is defeated in a second. Richard is still a star on the ground. Another barbarian says that Russell destroyed even the earth, unless an aristocrat survives like that. Meanwhile, the employee calls for someone to help, then tearfully says that her arena will have to pay a huge compensation. But then Russell, proudly leaving, is grabbed by the leg. Richard gets up from his seat. The woman is surprised that the aristocrat is standing on his feet at all. Richard says he was afraid Russell would say he was mocking him, so he let him start. He swings his fist and hits Russell in the stomach. He falls and does not understand how an aristocrat can be okay, because he has never been wrong. Meanwhile, Richard stands with a clenched fist, warm energy emanating from his body, fire. He had been training for many years using the Lord's system. How can he lose to someone with such shitty skills? Then he turns to Russell, offering to continue. But this time, he won't have a chance. Russell gets up, calls him the son of a whore, and attacks with madness. But at this moment, the aristocrat grabs him by the arm, lifts him up and throws him to the other side. Thus, Russell finds himself under the foot of Richard, who says that he has won. Russell, surprised, asks how this could have happened and what he has just done, and getting up from the ground, offers to repeat, do it again. Richard, calm and confident, says that it looks like he hasn't given up yet and agrees to one more time. Other barbarians also do not understand, asking questions. What happened just now? Kakon could win against Russell. But this time the first one is attacked not by Russell, but by Richard. He just takes him by the hand again and slams him into the ground. He falls backwards into the ground, for the first, and for the second, and for the third time, and even for the 10th time. Richard asks again if he hasn't given up yet. All bruised and swollen, Russell again offers him to repeat, because he can still fight. He barely gets up from his seat, trembling all over. He has bruises all over his body. One eye is half closed from the fact that he is swollen from the blow, and his cheek is broken. In a crowd of barbarians, one super pumped, with long hair and a mustache braided into pigtails, tells him to just give up, because he lost for the 10th time. From what he heard, Russell himself is shocked. Did he really lose to him 10 times? Suddenly, a girl comes out of the crowd with chains in her neck and arms, and horns on her head, and says that this is enough. The crowd calls her the boss. She comes out and says she's going to fight now. The barbarians are still standing in the arena. A girl who everyone calls the boss comes forward. A beaten Russell is sitting on the side. One declares that it is the time of the chief. The other adds that the aristocrat is finished. Richard asks her if she really has the right to make decisions, to which she answers with a question. She just needs to defeat him. She shows her fist. By the way, her hands are bandaged and chained from fingers to elbows. She says that when he loses, they will be free whether he really fulfills the promise. He replies that he is a man of his word. She starts off and rushes to him with confidence, saying that then let them start already. Richard is surprised that she is so fast. A characteristic of the girl appears behind him. The barbarian Gunther is defined as a hero. He is distracted by the window with Gunther's characterization, at which point she attacks sharply. He defends himself with his hands, pulls back, but can resist the blow. He thinks that the pop-up window of the system has ruined everything, but this is the first time he sees the hero. He decides to see how strong she is. She attacks him again from a high jump, saying that the man should not be distracted. Richard manages to escape from the spot. Her blow falls into the ground, from which she cracked with even greater force. That worker is still worried about her arena and compensation. Meanwhile, the servant reflects that this barbarian chief is unexpectedly strong. It will not end well. One of the barbarian crowd shouts for her to kill him. The other adds that no man stands in the way of the chief. Meanwhile, Gunther tears off a piece of it from the ground, lifts it above him, and throws this huge stone at Richard. The stone hits the boss. There is a lot of dust from the blow. The worker comes out and says that everything is bad. This is the end, then turns to the boss with the words that she killed him and what will happen to her arena. Meanwhile, she stands contentedly, putting one foot on the stone with which she crushed the aristocrat. The crowd of barbarians rejoices. One of them shouts that long live their boss, the other that she gave them freedom. Beaten, sitting on the side, Russell says that his abilities were not enough, great speed and remarkable strength. But at this moment he picks up a stone. The chief steps aside, not understanding the situation. Richard picks up this huge stone with one hand and says it's a good material. Barbarians in shock ask one after another questions. Is he still alive? Is he not dead yet, and how can he still hold on like this? The boss looks at him in surprise at first, then says that it's interesting and then suggests continuing. Richard tells her that to be the chief of the barbarians, brute force is not enough. She will not be able to defeat him like this. But while the aristocrat was chatting, the girl managed to get around him, surround his neck with her chains, and pull him back so that he fell to the ground. The chain tightens, and, accordingly, squeezes Richard's neck, suffocating him. The girl declares that he has lost. Richard holds the chains, trying to free himself, and says that she still used the stone for distraction, and that at this moment he just breaks the iron chains, ending his words by saying that she is amazing. The crowd can't believe their eyes. Russell can't understand how this is possible, because these iron chains were forged by the best dwarf craftsmen. They were used to bind animals. The girl herself is also in shock, because these chains have kept her in a desperate situation for so many years, and he just broke them with his bare hands. Richard says that she is fast, strong, and uses a certain strategy. She is great for the role of a subordinate. The girl began to worry, because all this time he did not use his real power. She wonders what kind of monster he is in general. She starts shouting to him that since they are both on the same battlefield, let him respect her and give his best. Otherwise, in another case, she will not obey him. Richard says she was shackled before, so she wasn't in the best condition either. And now the real battle begins. Richard attacks the girl. She defends herself and reflects the blow. Richard tries to attack from above. The girl dodges this blow. Meanwhile, in the crowd, one says that Richard is much faster with his speed than their boss. Another adds that he is much stronger. And on the battlefield, Richard finally grabs the girl by the neck and slams her into the ground. She can't move, But suddenly he starts to take his hand away. She stops him and says that she lost, and if he wants to take revenge for what happened before, then let him just do it. Richard swings. The girl closes her eyes, expecting a blow, but when she opens them again, she sees that he has finally broken her chains. She looks at him. He now sets a condition for everyone, saying that they have a choice. Either they will continue to fight with him until everyone loses, or join him. Together they will become stronger. After these words, he holds out his hand to the girl. She accepts help, gets up and turns to her barbarians. She announces that from this day on, this aristocrat will also be the leader. She falls on his lap, bowing her head. Richard now shouts to everyone that his name is Richard Orlando, and he becomes an almighty lord. He calls to join him, and together they will become stronger. At first, everyone in the crowd looks at each other, and then they shout that they join him, follow his orders, and call him boss. Meanwhile, those two caretakers are surprised by the outcome. The servant thinks it's no wonder that old Orlando gave his name to him. A window appears behind Richard again, where each barbarian with his own name requests permission to join his group. He accepts everyone. It's a wild world filled with chaos and blood. Here, countless ambitious people have become lords and created a world of their own reality. However, most of them died and left this world in despair. Richard and the barbarians are walking down the street. He says that he, as a pioneer, can't wait to start his journey. Now that he has barbarians, he has taken his first step in a new life. They are in a small town with a small number of people. He approaches one house. He needs to dress his army. They go into the store. The barbarians are delighted with the clothes. They wonder if the boss will buy them new clothes. One bearded man takes a cute little t-shirt and says he wants it, and Gunther tells him that this t-shirt does not suit him at all. The shop owner, Gnome Negan, comes out to them, greets them and asks how he can help them. Richard says that he is here to buy equipment for his brothers. He has heard that this gnome has a good weapon. He answers him that he seems to know a lot about their goods. He puts his hand on one of the bricks. This brick shifts, the name of the store changes, it was Negan's clothes, and it became Negan's weapon. Suddenly, all the walls began to turn. All the clothes go inside other rooms, and the store itself is now filled with shelves of weapons. The seller asks what they need, because all his goods are of the highest quality. The barbarians are surprised. Now they are considering all the weapons. Richard orders to give each of them a pike and 3 throwing spears. The seller immediately calculates the cost and says that a pike and 3 throwing spears will cost him 15 gold. A total of 750 gold will come out, since he has 50 people. Richard throws a few coins on the table and says that he has only this. There is very little left. The old dwarf does not like it. He asks for forgiveness and says that they do not do business with the poor and do not issue loans. Against the background, Gunther, hearing the words, wanted to object, but at that moment Richard tells the owner not to hurry. He pulls out a sword and says what if he adds this sword? The seller clearly did not expect this. He asks if this is a snake killer. Good God, this is the first time he sees such a legendary weapon. He barely holds this sword with his height and weight, trembling all over. The seller thought about it, came to the conclusion that since this guy has such a high-quality sword, he is probably an important person. He should not contradict him. The dwarf tells him that it would be sad to leave this sword to pour out here and suggests the following. Let him keep the sword, that is, Richard, and he, the seller, will let him sign the contract, and he will pay for everything on the loan. Richard takes back the sword and tells the barbarians that each of them should take a pike, 3 throwing spears and leather armor. Let them prepare for the journey. The seller does not understand where the leather armor came from. Richard turns to him. Isn't this sword also worth leather armor for everyone? The salesman orders Dojin, the shop assistant, to bring them their weapons. He obeys, and against the background of the barbarians shout that their boss is well. Gunther asks what they will do next. Richard replies that they will seize the land that rightfully belongs to them. They walk across the field with horses, weapons, and chariots. Richard looks carefully at the map. Someone is watching him through binoculars and says that pioneers or caravans have not passed here for a long time. This time their victim has a lot of things and materials. This is the goblin chief Harem. Next to the goblins there is a creature with the body of a wolf and shouts to give him half of the weapon at least. This is the leader of the jackals. That goblin says where it is even less for him. The leader of the jackals yells to him that they have 5 times more people than they, goblins. Meanwhile, he thinks that everyone knows that jackals are stupid. The goblin chief asks why there is such a rush. He suggests waiting until they come to the hunting grounds. They will not have the opportunity to escape or call for help. Another chief says that the main thing is that he and his brothers have a good battle. Gunther hears these words and tells Richard that they have a brag behind them. It looks like it's a gang of bandits. Richard says he knows that. The surprised one asks if he really had a plan from the very beginning. He sharply orders everyone to stop, surround the cart, start animals, put things inside and prepare for the attack. He calls Gunther, saying that he needs to say something. She asks what he wants from them. He hands her an azure bag and tells her to distribute them to everyone and tell them to swallow one for each. She takes some balls of the same color out of the bag, first swallows Richard himself and says that these are pills from the east. They make people stronger. He orders them to swallow them quickly and prepare for battle. They obey, swallow, of course, not without questions. One is surprised that such things exist at all. Richard says why would he lie to them? But in fact, of course, he lied to them. It's just dumplings, but he'll use the system. On the sidelines, a window appears in front of him again, where the manual for improving the mountain barbarian soldier is painted. Most barbarians are defined by the system as soldiers. One Gunther is defined as a hero. Barbarians will gain experience after battles and improve by the system. This happens because the system is too powerful. In a short period of time, the overall strength will increase, and they will feel something is wrong. That's why he used dumplings as a decoy. He holds a magic pill in his hands and tells everyone that they will all feel the power. Meanwhile, the goblins and jackals watching them notice that they had stopped. The leader yells again that now these idiots will definitely die. The goblin chief hits him on the chest and asks what made him so happy. He assumes because they were scared. And the goblin with a nasty smile replies that they stopped because they were scared by their strength, and they decided to just give up. They stand up abruptly. The goblin shouts that they don't care and orders everyone to go ahead and not take prisoners. Richard's group notices them and tells the others that they are coming. He gives the order to everyone to prepare for battle. The barbarians, as Richard had said, surrounded the wagon. The jackals are furious at them. One laughs, then howls, and then only shouts that those who want weapons simply take them away from the barbarians. And the goblin gives the order to kill and destroy them all. There are surprisingly many goblins and jackals. They attack them all at once. Richard says they'll start. He takes a spear, swings it and throws it towards the advancing goblins and jackals. Richard throws a spear towards the goblins. The goblin reflects the blow with his arm, or rather with the iron armor surrounding his arm. The spear breaks into two pieces. The sharp part flies away from it and hits another goblin in the head. The goblin who deflected the blow, rubbing his hand, says that it is quite powerful, but not threatening enough. Then he shouts that they are several times their strength, and they will have nothing left but to die. Goblin orders everyone to attack. Everyone obediently and growling rush to attack. The barbarians get scared and doubt their abilities. One swears and announces that they are coming. Another says that no matter how powerful they are, they cannot defeat such a huge army. The jackal attacks one, who stabs him in the stomach with his weapon, causing him to cough, and blood flows from his wound. The battle begins. The jackals scratch the barbarians. A huge goblin fights with several at the same time. Russell and another one are surrounded by a lot of goblins and jackals. Russell attacks the jackals, calling them fucking dogs. But 3 jackals attack him at the same time. Blood splashes around him. Meanwhile, another giant goblin grabs the barbarian with one hand and squeezes him so hard that his body just bursts like a bubble. Gunther sees the situation and asks the boss what they should do. The one standing on the cart asks Gunther to give him another spear. She resists, and tells him that he won't kill them like that, because there are too many of them, but still passes him the spear. He takes this spear and confidently says that they don't need to kill them all, they just need to find the right target. He gets into a ready-made pose. The iron end of the spear rubs against the surface of the cart so that a fire is formed. He swings with all his might. Gunther sees and is surprised by the fire on the tip. Richard throws this spear with fire at one of the huge goblins. The spear pierces the goblin's head so that it simply bursts. He remains without a head. All the other goblins and jackals see what happened and can't believe that he was just left without a head. Abruptly, everyone started screaming in fear. The jackals immediately run away, because it is impossible to kill a troll with one spear. Richard shouts after them not to run away, let them take care of the giant first. The rest of the barbarians cheered up that the boss killed the troll with one spear, so they have nothing to fear. After that, they all join the attack. One kicks the jackal so that he flies back. The living Russell orders everyone to fight back, pushing 2 jackals along the way. Suddenly, one appears behind him with an axe. Russell manages to realize that this is the leader of the jackals, and that he does not have time to defend himself. He tries to dodge the blow, but at that moment he sees that the leader of the jackals has already been struck in the chest with a spear. It was Richard, standing on the cart, who threw this spear. Russell is open-mouthed glad that the boss saved him. Richard pulls out his legendary sword from their case and shouts to everyone, pointing the sword forward that the leader of these guys is dead. They have no strength left, then orders everyone to finish them off. Excited barbarians attack and kill one goblin after another. One gives a savory punch to a goblin with messages to go to hell. Gunther says that, it turns out, the boss was aiming at their leader and was standing on the cart so that the view was better. The boss replies that, as they say, to catch bandits, you must first catch their leader. He's finished watching, there's only one guy left to finish off. This goblin guy, gritting his teeth, says what a bunch of losers, isn't this an ordinary fucking person? Let them see what they've done. An unpleasant, poisonous green energy is emanating around this goblin. Richard tells him that he looks like a goblin chief, then he asks if he planned this attack, ambushed them, but was not afraid that he would fall into the hands of more powerful races. The goblin chief replies that the nearest one is in a highland fortress, which is a couple of miles to the east. It is easy to defend and difficult to besiege. But these kobolds do not have the courage to go out and steal his battle trophies. Richard shows his sword to the snake killer and thanks the goblin chief for such detailed information, because it will greatly help them. Then he says that he is ashamed that he did not let him take their things, so he will use a killer snake. The goblin immediately becomes alert and prepares to attack. Confident Richard concludes his speech by giving this sword to him. In the next second, we see the body of the goblin leader already dissected along. The rest of the goblins raise a panic. They no longer have a leader. This is bad. The leader is dead. They call Richard just a monster. They stand in fear with their mouths open. Sweat is flowing from them. Gunther orders his barbarians to kill them. They attack them. The goblins are destroyed. Richard receives an urgent notification from the system that his barbarians are increasing from level 3 to 4. The boss smiles when he sees this information. One of the barbarians says he feels like he is getting stronger. Others laugh and support. They ask if these pills really work. Another barbarian says that these bandits have a lot of things. They can be sold and earn a lot of money. The other two barbarians approach Richard with other giant trolls and say they have subdued them and asks if they should kill them. Richard thinks about it, then says that it is not necessary, because one horse was killed, so they will carry things. Then he calls these two trolls marshals Hang and Ha. Gunther approaches the boss and informs him that he has found Harson's map. He takes the card from her hands, opens it and says that it's not bad. He rolls this map back up and announces to everyone that their next stop is the Highland Fortress. A huge troll drags a cart behind him, on which Richard is sitting and looking for something on the map. He says that this is a fairly fast troll. At this rate they will soon reach the high mountain fortress. The system panel appears in front of him again, where his various characteristics are shown. In possession of weapons, namely one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, double staff, bow and arrow, throwing, and from abilities, steel bone, heavy attack, weapon mastery, shield, horseback riding, management, trade. He concludes that after each improvement he gets bonus points for personal attributes in the system. He sees that now the button of the store is gray. He is still inactive. You need to first pump up the power and throwing points. Weapon possession can be improved not only by adding points, but also by participating in battles. Nevertheless, the attribute bonus is organic talent, and he does not have any magical talents. He can only choose hand-to-hand combat. Right now he is 10 times stronger than an ordinary person, and I wonder if he will continue to become a jock. He imagines himself in his head as the future, very pumped up, with abs cubes, and with huge biceps and triceps muscles. Then Gunther tells him that they have arrived at the foot of a high-altitude fortress. Richard asks to take a look. He gets up and sees nature, the foot of the mountain, quiet water, greenery. He says it's not so bad here. The barbarians began to bathe in the water. They washed themselves thoroughly. One of them says that he spent his whole life in the Colosseum and therefore understood. One barbarian tells Chief Gunther maybe she will bathe. She resists and tells him to wash himself first. Richard is sitting next to Gunther, relaxed. Two barbarians approach them with dead rabbits. One says that there are a lot of wild animals in the area. They have caught a few and will soon begin a full-fledged hunt. Richard thinks to himself that these guys have a lot of survival skills in stock. Then he notices that Gunther is sniffing his hand. He tells her that she has been fighting a lot in the last 2 days. Maybe he will bathe and rest. Gunther is surprised and blushes. The boss says there is a hidden pond here. Then he asks her not to worry, because he will follow these guys. Gunther is happy and Red thanks the boss. In another place full of greenery, in a hidden pond, surrounded by large stones, Gunther is washing, rubbing his shoulders, elbows, forearms. She relaxes and has a nice rest. Night is coming. There is a full moon in the sky and numerous stars that are visible even through the clouds. Richard gives the order for everyone to get ready. They are standing at the cliff around one wooden house. The boss says that this is a high-altitude fortress. They will make their camp out of this place. They look more closely and see the guards near the gate. These are kobolds who occupied the high mountain fortress. One of the barbarians says that these guys are not particularly strong. They can just go and kill them all. Richard gives the go-ahead and offers to attack now without delay. Meanwhile, inside the building, a cute puppy pulls the lips into a kiss to the cat. She calls him stupid. He does not back down and asks her, calling her dear. And then Richard comes in, kicking the door that they slam against the wall with a bang. The angry dog asks who he is. The cat is also in a misunderstanding. Someone announces to everyone to gather there has been an invasion. A barbarian approaches Richard and informs him that they have taken care of all the kobolds outside. The chief of these kobolds is even more shocked by this information. He furiously tells them how they dared to attack his army. He has a huge gang nearby, and if something happens to him, they will not leave the attackers so easily. Let them just wait for their punishment. The boss rubs his chin and looks at him with a sly smile. In the next second, this chapter is tied upside down with its feet. He says he was mistaken. Richard, standing next to him, asks with a grin that he said so. He does not hear. The dog apologizes again and says he was too arrogant. Gunther is watching the whole picture. Suddenly Richard gives the order to untie him. Gunther asks if he really wants to let him go. He replies that yes. Gunther cuts the rope and orders him to get out. The head of the dogs runs from all paws and at the same time reflects that he has never been so insulted, and that they will still wait for their own. One of the barbarians says that he did not expect that they would take the high mountain fortress so easily. Gunther replies that these kobolds are so useless. Richard tells them that he has inspected the building from the inside. There is a lot of space here, more than enough to set up a lair. The facilities in the fortress are well equipped. There is also a great field of view. They can see everything a couple of miles around. After a while, the boss pulls out a card and reveals it to the others. He appeals to everyone to listen to him, because they will now hold the first combat meeting. The barbarian standing next to him does not understand and asks if they really need to fight again. Richard explains that the high-altitude fortress is at an altitude. It is easy to defend and difficult to attack. There is also a plentiful water source nearby, so this is a great place for a base. If this place was occupied by kobolds who have no strengths, it's likely that they really have a large army nearby. One barbarian intervenes and informs them that their leader was released a minute ago. Won't it come back to them in the future? And what if he really brings an army with him? Richard replies that they have spent a lot of money on weapons and equipment, so it's time for their people to get together and earn some minted. He takes out a gold coin and says that it is better to attack them all at once than to remove one by one. He tosses this coin and catches it while it was falling on the card. The coin falls on a certain object on the map. Richard says they will just kill them all in one fell swoop. Night, crescent moon. Someone says that today's soup with potatoes and bacon is very tasty. Gunther turns to the boss and says that so many days have passed, so why haven't these bandits done anything yet? Richard, who eats appettingly, replies to her that she is too impatient, and that haste will spoil everything. One of the barbarians says the boss was right. Another reports, pointing out the window with his finger, that there is a combat unit nearby, and it looks like they are planning a covert attack. Richard gets up from the table with the words "Here's the money" and orders everyone to get ready for battle. Richard looks through binoculars at the camp and sees that people are sleeping there. He says they decided to sleep during a sneak attack. He assumes that these must be the goblins that the kobold called. He would simply use this opportunity to establish his supremacy over the high mountain fortress. Then he gives instructions and says that he will take only Gunther's squad with him, and the rest together with the trolls will guard the fortress. The barbarians do not hesitate to agree and obey. Richard suggests finishing it quickly. Gunther says they will. Barbarians approach goblins sleeping without hind legs in tents. Gunther opens one tent and kills the sleeping goblin inside with his sword. Everyone wakes up from the noise and the battle begins. Meanwhile, the observer Richard thinks that the Highland barbarians have excellent individual abilities, but their teamwork leaves much to be desired. The main problem is that they do not have proper training. Strength alone will not make them qualified soldiers. On the battlefield, Gunther orders the barbarians to stay in the hollow. They will destroy them in one move. Richard continues to reflect and concludes that now these barbarians have become elite soldiers, able to organize their forces. The system has given them more than just an increase in strength. One barbarian calls them, looking at the defeated goblins, a bunch of losers. Suddenly he loses his balance because the ground is shaking. They don't understand if it's an earthquake. Suddenly, a huge goblin with horns comes out of the ground, which is called dragon goblins. He has a double-sided axe. The barbarians are blunted. One says what kind of Hulk it is. He even has horns. Another tells the others that it is a goblin with dragon blood. Others wonder what kind of dragon blood it is. The goblin growls. More goblins come out of the ground. There are more and more of them. The barbarians were wary of how they get out of the ground. Why are there so many of them? Gunther asks the boss to be careful. It's not so easy to handle him. Suddenly, a goblin with dragon's blood opens his hands and orders someone to come out, calling him his huge beast. The earth shakes again, and a huge creature of white color and with scales appears under this goblin. The barbarians are again frightened by the fact that this monster is huge. A goblin sitting on another lizard-like monster calls the barbarians stupid losers. Then, this goblin, pointing his weapon at the barbarians, tells them to let him, the dragon's blood, punish them all. Gunther tells him to shut up and throws his spear at him. The spear only cuts into the monster, but does not cause any harm. The goblin laughs and menacingly asks if she really wants to pierce the armor of his huge beast with this fragile wand. Let her know her place, and calls Gunther a loser. He then tells her to know the power of the noble dragon blood and attacks her. Gunther is only swearing in his thoughts, not having time to prepare for the blow, when suddenly Richard stands in front of her and holds one paw of this monster so that his feet dig into the ground that it cracks. He holds his paw tightly and throws it aside with a cry. The monster falls hard to the ground. The goblins surrounding him are shocked. They start screaming in panic. One barbarian wonders how strong he is. The fallen goblin with the dragon's blood barely gets up with a shudder, saying that this is impossible. Richard grins at his words about noble dragon blood. He laughs and says sarcastically, maybe his nobility will give up. The goblin only gets angry at this, and, gritting his teeth, asks if he really thinks that this is enough. He stealthily picks up his weapon and wants to attack Richard sharply with the words that he will never give up. But Richard, clever, just dodges the blow and punches him in the face with all his might. Did the goblin still have the guts to attack Richard? He defiantly straightens his cloak and heroically turns away with the words that, as he said, they will finish it quickly. While Richard examines the window with the characteristics, in the background, the barbarian rejoices that he received a weapon from a goblin with dragon's blood, saying that it now belongs to him. We see that the barbarian levels have been upgraded and the experience has increased by 175 units. Richard thinks he'll just add that point to Gunther's strength. At this time, she calls him, holding something with chains. And then it turns out that they tied the chains of that monster lizard. Gunther shows him it, saying that they brought him a gift. There are also barbarians with huge boxes with her. One opens the chest and says that these guys were very poor because there are only 2 gold coins inside the chest. Richard says with a smile that it looks like these guys are having a hard time too. Gunther turns to him with a monster and asks what they should do with this thing. Richard licks his lips and thinks out loud, wondering if his meat is delicious. The monster turns his head hastily and diligently. Then the boss pats this monster on the head and says that now he will drive him. He will call the monster Windrunner, then sets a condition that if the monster dares to disobey, he will feed everyone with his meat. Gunther calls the boss, offering to come back and have lunch. Richard is still looking out the window with the characteristics, riding at the top of this monster, which is now called Vetragon. He notices that the store icon is now available. He is given an old-fashioned knight's spear for 800 dinars. Now his wallet is empty, so he can only choose weapons at a discount. After the purchase has been made, a light appears over Richard, from which this weapon then comes out. He catches this old-fashioned knight's spear. He finally understood the system of how it works. Gunther saw this fraud. He asks the boss if he can even use special magic. Richard says there was some movement. The barbarian replies that it looks like a group of jackals engaged in robbery. Richard, looking through binoculars, informs everyone that this is a rich caravan, and that it is not surprising that they have attracted jackals. There are a lot of carts with horses. Ordinary people on the defensive are waiting for the attack of the jackals who surrounded them. Gunther asks the boss if they should intervene. Richard replies that apparently this is not an ordinary caravan. Then he says that the first trading experience is very important for the Pioneer Lord. Maybe they will help him with business in the future. Meanwhile, the Jackal orders ordinary people to quickly hand over all the money to them, because they are in the territory of the Jackals. The old man replies that they are from the Voya Trading Company, and if they harm them, the Imperial Army will not spare them. The Jackals just laugh. The leader says they are bandits. Does the old man think they are scared just because he mentioned, as he says, the Pompeian Empire? After the words, he orders everyone to attack the rich caravan. One of the defenders tries to detain the Jackals and asks the old man to run. But at that moment one of the enemies hits the old man from behind. He falls, bleeding, begging for mercy from in return for the fact that he will give the money. The Jackal says it's too late to ask for mercy, no one will save him. But suddenly and with high speed, the spear, recently acquired by the boss, plunges into the chest of the Jackal. The Jackal's mouth is bleeding, the old man and everyone else are in shock. Meanwhile, Richard, who threw the spear, notices that the new spear works pretty well. Here Gunther orders his barbarians to kill them. The barbarians obey and attack from the very first second. Jackals don't understand who they are. Richard, leaning against a tree, says that these Jackals are just a gang of bandits, and that this time he will only be an observer. While the barbarians attack and kill the Jackals, Gunther boldly orders them to split into two fronts. Richard reflects that, of course, the barbarians are strong. But as a pioneer, he prefers a disciplined army, and this is what was needed for his army. All the Jackals were beaten. Two remained on their feet. One of them decided to just run away, which the other did not like. He asks the question, is he really running away? The escapee replies that if he has not yet understood, then they, that is, the team of Richard and the barbarians, destroyed the alliance between goblins, trolls, and jackals. They even recaptured kobold territory with ease. The other reacts by saying that he, Richard, was the one who appeared unexpectedly, the legendary noble lord of the wildlands. He finally understands the situation and shouts that they are cursed, and they'd better run away. And these two jackals run away as fast as they can. But, unfortunately, a windmill appears from under the ground, which overturns them to the sides. The monster catches these jackals. Richard is still thinking that this time his army will be able to finish off the jackals without his intervention. Now they are not the confused and scattered bunch they were before. One of the barbarians removes his sword. A jackal falls behind him with a wound, which exudes blood. He reports that he killed the last jackal. Peaceful merchants get up. One of them approaches Richard and thanks him for his help, calling him a warrior. He also says that he will sing his praises. Richard is not shy and says that if they want to repay him, then it's better to just give money. That person is surprised with such an answer. A girl with long golden hair gets out of the cart and says that, as expected from a greedy aristocrat, and calls him a really interesting person. A girl, a Voya merchant, gets out of the cart. She introduces herself to Annie. She turns to the man from behind, calls him Rudo, and asks if he's okay. He responds positively. Annie bows and thanks Richard and the barbarians for their selfless rescue. Richard laughs and says that his soldiers are very brave. Jackals are no match for them. The barbarian standing next to him privately calls him pretentious, sulks about why the boss never praised them under normal circumstances. Annie addresses Richard as a lord and says she would like to ask him for help. Richard asks what the help is. Annie says that apparently they have suffered heavy losses, and many people have been injured and killed. They cannot complete the deal with the remaining caravans. She hopes they can stay with them for a while. Richard says without any pity that living in his estate costs a lot of money. He boasts that in his homeland this estate is called a 5-star hotel. Annie replies that she wants to use money and weapons as payment. She then orders Rudo to bring this thing. Rudo obeys and brings a turquoise ball with stars. Richard asks what it is. Annie tells him to look carefully. The ball flies up and increases in size. Annie says it's a communication crystal. She uses it to send their trading house a message for help. Richard asks when the reinforcements will arrive. She replies that they need at least 3 days, because this place is too far from the city of Harem. The cunning Richard is still thinking in his head that this is not an ordinary caravan. When his business starts, he will be able to earn a lot of money. Then he tells them to go with him, and that he, Richard, the lord of the Highland Fortress, will never refuse friendly guests. Annie asks him to take care of them. They arrive at the fortress. Richard watches as the people from the caravan settle down on the street, bandaging the wounds of the sick. Annie asks Rudo to give the potion to the wounded soldiers. Rudo obeys. She pours the blue liquid from the cone into a huge bucket. Richard, watching the action, realizes that this is a legendary healing potion that was inaccessible to him due to the low level. The characteristic of this potion: a high-level magician personally blessed the creation of this potion. It is also supplemented with the magic of a medium-level magician. Its effect is instant healing of a wounded person, and if you increase the dose tenfold, he will be able to revive a dead man, and this potion costs 50,000 dinars per bottle. Richard remembers all this information, especially about the price, and realizes that, as he expected, this is a very unusual caravan. Night falls. Annie asks Rudo if he has checked all the victims. He replies that they have no problems with finances or things, but half of their group is either injured or dead. Annie reacts sadly to the response, calling the victims poor people. Rudo here says that, fortunately, Richard saved them, otherwise the consequences would have been enormous. Annie asks Rudo what he thinks of Richard. He replies that, of course, he is a great lord. When the jackals attacked them, they were already in a desperate situation. But suddenly his soldiers appeared and immediately turned the situation upside down. His soldiers are very strong. Then he concludes that their troops are not standing next to them. Annie agrees and says that they survived thanks to him. At this time, Richard thinks about the soldiers of the caravan, that they are well equipped. It seems to him that it looks more impressive, against the background of 4 barbarians fighting for weapons, because they can't share it. Richard looks at them and continues to reflect that this time he not only received the caravan armor without paying a penny, but also Fred's battle axe as a reward from the system. Then, smiling, he concludes that his soldiers have also grown up. Suddenly Gunther comes to the boss with the words that something has happened. He asks what kind of panic she has. The barbarians also turn to her. Gunther finally says that right now she saw a large armed group of half-human, half-horses heading towards them. Richard doesn't understand what kind of half-humans and half-horses they are. People with the torso of horses are really approaching them. Half-men and half-horses are approaching the gate, led by a girl with silver hair named Heather from the Storm clan. She has a sword in her hand. Suddenly spears fly towards them. They fall directly to the ground below them. Heather notices that the throw was so powerful and orders the others to continue advancing. Richard, spear in hand, is surprised that they ignore his warnings and again throws spears with all his might along with the barbarians. One of them flies straight at the Heather, but she deflects the blow by cutting the spear straight in half with her sword. After that, she orders everyone to stop, because it's too dangerous at such a distance. Heather takes out a white handkerchief, wraps it around his sword, raises it and waves it to them as a sign that they surrender. Gunther tells Tom how witty this centaur is, then turns to the boss, suggesting that they have given up. Richard says they'll probably meet them. Then he orders them not to remove the protection, because their intentions are unclear. The barbarians obey. Richard goes out to the Heather and asks to explain the purpose of their coming here. Heather bows, introduces herself as the leader of the Storm clan, and she came with good intentions. Richard, in turn, also introduces himself as the Lord of the Highland Fortress. Heather immediately asks if this is really the invincible Richard from the martial arts competition in the southern province. Richard already smiled. He asks if she knows about him. She replies that his reputation has spread quite far. Even the Storm clan, which lives in the wilderness, has heard about his achievements. Richard says with a cute smile that this is an undeserved reputation. Then Heather holds out a piece of wood and says that they have come to tell him something important. Richard takes this board and asks what it says, because he can't read anything. Heather replies that the locals want to create an army, so they sent her this invitation. Other barbarians approach Richard, while Heather continues to say that the Highland Fortress used to belong to kobolds, and since they are now forming an army. Here Gunther interrupts her and says that the locals have always hated the conquerors, and she assumes that Richard understands what this means. Richard squeezes this board with one hand so that it just breaks into small pieces. He says that they want to win back a high mountain fortress. Here Heather says that he is right, and that they, the kobolds, have also enlisted the help of shamans and sorcerers, and their power should not be underestimated. Richard begins to speak, assuming what she means by this, but then Heather, bowing her head, kneeling and placing her hand at her chest as a sign of respect, openly says that since he will face great difficulties, her clan offers him help. Richard asks why they are helping him, and not those who are going to win back. Heather replies that the Storm clan once belonged to the Orc Kingdom. They never join the locals and do not become bandits. Then she tells the past of her tribe, where everyone works in the field. They lived a quiet life. Her people had good manners and an amazing culture of poetry and chronicles. Someone painted, someone played a musical instrument. Now they want to count on a powerful lord to bring back the glory days of her clan. Next, Richard looks into the window and says that since the system receives their requests, it means that they really want to join. He looks at the characteristics of Heather, where it is written that she is afraid of fire, knows how to use a long and short bow, as well as a heavy machete. He says these centaurs can fight from a distance. He brings both to the estate and introduces the leader of the Storm clan, Heather, and says that, to be honest, they brought some pretty bad news. Annie asks how the bad news is. Richard replies that kobolds and jackals will declare war on them again soon enough. Annie is alarmed and asks how Richard thinks how soon this will happen. The Lord thinks and answers that at least 10 days. After these words, Annie and Rudo worry and think about what they should do next. And Gunther and Russell are happy that there will be more victims. Heather reports that although the locals already have an army, it includes many different races. They have exactly divided the work and are preparing food for the army, and they need at least 10 days to get here. Richard gets up and says that even though the enemy is strong, they have 10 days, and that's enough. He reveals the card, puts it on the table, and tells everyone that he has created a strategy to defeat the enemy. Gunther rejoices and asks if the boss already has a plan. Can he tell them too? Richard replies that they will find out when the time comes, but for now they don't worry. He turns to Miss Annie, saying that to meet such a formidable enemy, he has a request for him. Miss Annie tells him to talk. He voices his request. He wants to borrow 500 gold coins from Annie. She calmly says that it's no problem. If it helps, she will give 500 gold coins to him. Richard, bowing slightly, says that the Highland Fortress will always be grateful for her generosity. Night. Richard asks Heather if centaurs are good with onions. She replies that the Storm clan has the best archers. Richard looks through the weapons store through his window. He goes to the bows and arrows section and says that it is very expensive. The equipment of soldiers eats up a lot of money. He makes a purchase. Next to him, a purple bow and a pointed arrow with a white feather appear out of the light. He tells her to try this bow and arrow. Heather is awkward. She asks if he uses magic. He answers her, holding out the weapon, that it's just a little trick. She takes this bow, inserts an arrow there, pulls it, and shoots an arrow into a tree. Or rather into a bee that was flying there. Her body split into two. Richard praises her, saying that, as expected, her technique is excellent. These centaurs will strengthen the remote defense of the Highland Fortress. Heather bows and thanks Sir Richard because she hasn't used such a heavy bow in a long time. He smiles back at her, laughs, and says that tomorrow she will be able to train. Suddenly Rudo runs to the sky and says that something is wrong. Rudo gets down on one knee and says they've found the caravan reinforcements, but it looks like they've been attacked. Richard calls Heather to find out what happened. Annie looks at the wounded people, tears flow from her eyes. She calls the attackers vile jackals. Richard arrives and asks Miss Annie about what happened. She gets up, turns to him and says that it looks like all the reinforcements have been destroyed. There are many corpses lying on the ground. Richard tells her that the high mountain fortress is not safe right now, so he suggests that she send the caravan back to the city of Salon. One of the wounded says to take healthy soldiers and horses. Even if they meet jackals, they will quickly lose to them. Miss Annie disagrees, saying she can't leave the wounded members of the caravan because they risk their lives to fight for her. Greedy aristocrat Richard says that in such a dangerous situation, the rent will be more expensive and that what he sees is worth 2,000 gold. A drooping Annie tells him to do as he sees fit. Heather examines the spears, then turns to Richard, saying that this spear is so rough and that it smells like Chinese pine, and it looks like they forged this tip themselves. Richard examines the sharp part of the spear and says that it is difficult to imagine that locals or savages could do such a thing. Annie replies that, in general, there are a lot more savages than they think. She begins to talk about the fact that there are much more powerful tribes in the very north. Large tribes include thousands of adult soldiers, and they often fight for territories to strengthen the army. They forge their weapons. Their strength is not comparable to the local savages. Heather turns to Miss Annie. Does she mean that the caravan was attacked by ice aborigines? Yes, she answers in the affirmative. Right now the local kobolds are gathering an army, and she is afraid that the appearance of the ice aborigines is a mismatch. Richard agrees and says that they too have joined the war. Gunther ambitiously says that it's better for them to come all at once, so that she can take them out in one blow. Richard says Gunther is right, they'll just catch everyone at once. 10 days later, the centaurs rush to Richard and report that they have discovered enemies. Richard asks where they are now. He replies that they have settled at the foot of the mountain, about 50 miles away, and it looks like they are going to attack tomorrow. Richard is happy with this news and says that they have been waiting for so long, and the time has finally come. Richard menacingly pulls out his sword and orders his army to get ready. It's time to fight. He raises his sword high above his head and says that they will cut off their heads and drink from them. The The barbarian army is enthusiastically ready for battle. They are advancing loudly with their weapons. Centaurs prepare a bow with arrows and stomp their hooves. Richard puts on his armor and notices that it is very heavy. Miss Annie turns to him and asks what his plan is, how he wants to act. He replies that first let them shoot all the arrows, and then attack. If they kill 100 people, the rest will fall by themselves. Rudo and Annie are surprised that this is the whole plan that Lord was talking about. Miss Annie tells him that they have at least 600 soldiers on their side, and this is 6 times more than the people in their front. Richard, standing powerfully, says that everything will be fine, and don't let them worry. Numerous goblins are walking through the mountains and rocks, led by their jackal leader, riding another jackal beast and saying that if these are all the soldiers that the Lord has, then they are asking for death. Then he turns to the kobold, calls him Chief Doghead, says that this time they need to defeat them as soon as possible. He replies that there is no need to hurry, because their leader, that is, Lord Richard, is quite strong, and then barks. They see through binoculars as Richard stands next to the beast Windrunner. Then the leader says that this time their army is assembled. They must crush them. They are all, both jackals and goblins, headlong, attacking the fortress. Richard, ready for battle, says that God gave them life, but, unfortunately, they do not value it. He raises his weapon and orders everyone to get ready for battle. Meanwhile, the army of jackals also go only forward and receive orders to bite them to death. Heather pulls an arrow into a bow. The other centaurs do the same, as soon as they receive the command to shoot. Everyone obeys and releases arrows at once. Arrows hit one jackal. Armed and protected goblin can deflect arrows with a shield. 2 huge camps are attacking each other with orders to kill each other. Goblins swing and also shoot with whatever they can, both swords and spears. The beast monster Vetrogan easily reflects them. The barbarians also fight confidently, without fear of enemies. As soon as the distance between the camps remains very small, the earth cracks sharply, from which the goblin with the dragon's blood comes out. Someone calls him Zhui Feng and asks him to show everyone how good he is. The wind dragon beast jumps with Richard at the top and with the weight just falls on the goblins, destroying them. Richard strikes one goblin with a huge weapon, similar to a fork. Another goblin cuts with an axe Russell. Gunther just takes and divides the goblin's body with his sword. They give the order to kill everyone and leave no one alive. A huge wind dragon kills jackals with its paws. 2 goblins with weapons attack Richard sitting on top. The Lord pulls out his weapon, similar to a fork, which transforms into nunchucks, and reflects the blow, but at the same time falls down. He concludes that these guys are pretty strong. 3 goblins attack him at the same time, but Richard kills them all in turn. While Richard is fighting, Gunther and Russell discuss the boss, saying that the Lord is too strong, and that he is almost like the devil. Observers, the leader of the jackals and the chief of the kobolds look from above with binoculars, see that everyone is dead and panic. Kobold says it's terrible and how is this possible at all? The jackal tells the sorcerer to use his spell. The kobold also agrees and barks again in panic. Meanwhile, the shaman conjures, pronouncing unknown and incomprehensible spells. Fire comes up from a certain volume of lava. Those 2 observers are happy, because I am sure that they will definitely die now. Richard turns around and sees this fireball and assumes that it is the shaman's magic. At the behest of the shaman, this ball now turns into a fiery dragon. The barbarians see this and do not understand if he is flying here. Richard tells them all to be careful. He gets into a pose to deflect the blow. He raises his weapon, ready to strike, but suddenly his weapon just breaks, which Richard did not expect. The fire has spread everywhere. The barbarians are scared. The spells of this shaman are very strong. One of them says it's the first time he's hurt himself. Richard says we need to find a way to deal with her. It looks like she controlled the fire with a cane. Heather comes up to him, asking if he's all right. He tells her she's just in time. He points his finger and asks if she can shoot a shaman at such a distance. She replies that she can do it without any problems. Heather tells everyone to listen to her command. The centaurs pull an arrow on the bow, and as soon as Heather utters the word fire, everyone releases arrows. She orders everyone not to stop. Everyone listens. A lot of arrows are flying at the observers. The jackal calls it a rain of arrows and orders goblins to protect the shaman. Goblin with his shields and his bodies protect the shaman standing by the fire. Richard swings and throws his spear, simultaneously ordering them to just take advantage of the opportunity and organize a surprise attack. The jackal says that if they protect the shaman, then everything will be fine. And while he was chatting, turning to the kobold, saying that they could turn their defeat into. He doesn't finish, the spear hits him directly. He leans back, defeating the goblins protecting the shaman. The shaman's cane breaks, after which the fireball is crushed and falls on his own army of goblins and jackals. Goblins get burns from the fire, they do not have time to dodge. They fall to the ground. Richard sees the situation with fire on his own. The kobold observer tries to help General Sun-Nulan, realizes that he is already dead, turns to the sorcerer. What should they do? The shaman begins to stir something over the bowl without a cane, some kind of purple energy, also similar to fire, comes out of it. Richard thinks that everything is already over and says that now is the time to clean up after himself. But suddenly he notices the goblins who were dead earlier are getting up from their seats. They have been possessed by the shaman's magic. Richard assumes it's blood magic. All goblins and jackals abruptly stand up and attack them without weapons. Richard swings his sword in a random trajectory in front of the jackal, after which the jackal's body simply split into parts. At the same time, the attacking 3 goblins die in the same way as the jackal. Richard tries to get further. Gunther also fights with goblins, killing them with his sword. Richard reaches the shaman and says he finally caught them. The kobold says it's over and barks again. The shaman sits on the kobold, and they try to escape. Richard asks if they really just want to run away. He takes off his helmet and throws it at them. The shaman falls off the kobold's shoulders. Richard approaches him and menacingly repeats again that he caught him. The shaman turns his head. Richard laughs and says that he did not expect that he would turn out to be a witch. Ickard, who has grabbed the shaman by the tail, asks Gunther what's wrong with Nat. She replies that Nat has a very serious wound. He needs a doctor. Richard throws a shaman into the ground and tells him that he has killed many people. He orders them to be saved. The shaman looks away and says that he was forced, and let him not be called as Hay. His name is Model. Richard, with a menacing face, asks that he also dares to argue with him, and says that he may not believe. He will make the boss suffer in all possible ways. The shaman immediately panics, shakes his hands and says that it is not necessary, and that he will do it. The shaman conjures near Nat. He wakes up abruptly, moans, moves his hand. Everyone is watching him closely with surprised and expectant faces. Someone says that the wound is healed, and that it is amazing. The shaman leans back and says she's tired. The barbarians have surrounded Nat. They exclaim that he is completely healthy, and that the wounds are as if nothing had happened. Richard at this time thinks that Model is strong not only in destruction, but also can heal people, and that she can be useful to them in a high mountain fort. Gunther asks the boss what they will do with the jackals and goblins. Richard says that we need to bring people to clean up the battlefield. Then he shouts loudly to the army to make all the survivors subordinate to him. One barbarian says that this time they have a big catch. Richard looks out the window with requests again. He is glad that there are a lot of requests, and also a lot of upgrades. The hero Russell is pumped up to a first-class warrior with an axe and gets 2 points of characteristics. Gunther is distracted by his question about what they will do with the witch Model lying quietly on the ground. Richard picks up the kobold by the leg and orders him to take her and the kobold with him, and then find out where from the base. Richard is still messing with the stats. He has split Heather's leveling points between strength and speed. He says he'll probably do it like this. He pokes at different button icons with boot drawings. Heather comes to him and informs him that they could not find out anything from the magician. Richard asks if they tried to torture her. She says they tried all kinds of threats and torture, but she didn't say anything. Richard confidently says that catching a phoenix is not as easy as catching a chicken. He will now show you how it should be. He gets up and walks towards them. The kobold is tied by the legs and arms and hangs against the wall. The shaman is rebelling, and if they hit her now, she will turn them all into insects. Richard and Heather enter the room. She immediately sits down straight, calls him Pompey, and says that he is finally here. Let him follow his subordinates, because they do not respect her at all. Richard with a smile again calls her not by name, but hey, and asks where her base is. The witch gets annoyed and shouts that she has already repeated many times that she will not say anything, and that she has the blood of a dragon. Richard just punches her in the face, which she just flies off in the middle of her monologue. Heather did not expect such an action. Richard takes her by the clothes, lifts her up, and says he will ask her again where her base is. She immediately replies that the base is located in the mountains 200 miles away. He keeps asking how many warriors are left in their tribe. She immediately replies that there are none left, since they defeated all of them. Richard menacingly says that if she lied to him, he will see how her teeth will break. She immediately panics and repents that she is telling the truth. All the soldiers went to war, and only old women and children remained. He asks again how many spells she knows. She, making eyes and almost crying, says that there are many different shamans in the wild, and that she has the blood of a red dragon. So she has mastered fire magic perfectly. Like the Minotaur shaman can control the element of the earth, create avalanches and destroy the earth, like the troll shamans who control trees and plants, killing all living things. Richard thinks about it and says that it seems that the wild environment is much more dangerous than he thought. He calls Heather to Gunther to make a plan of attack on the enemy base. The barbarian asks what they should do with the kobold and the witch. Richard says they are useless and orders them to be buried behind the mountain. Waddle immediately says that she is still useful, she can be useful to them. Richard asks what it can be useful for. She replies that when she came to the Highland Fortress, she saw two huge monsters. Huge monsters of the desert can also train magicians. Let her not think that they are so stupid. She goes on to say that at first glance she realized that they were special magicians, and since she is a shaman, she will be able to train them, and then they will become azure shamans with an infinite supply of mana.